Screen Slurps.
Hello and welcome to Screen Slurps, the movie review podcast where we discuss everything that is good, that is bad, and that is savage in the world of cinema. I'm Adam Meisner.
And I'm Laura Herlocker.
And I can see her face for once in my life. That is right. Typically, I'm staring at a computer screen when we do this show and not looking her directly in the eyes because that'd be a little too much for my sanity. But yet here I am. I'm about to marry her in about a year.
So you better get used to looking at me. We're going to have to see each other for a while, buddy boy.
I didn't just say that for an audience of thousands upon thousands of people. Anyways,
we love each other. We give each other crap because that's, it's fun. That's how our relationship works.
We love doing it.
Yeah.
We can't help it. What can I say? We love just making fun of each other from time to time.
We have a good relationship.
Yeah. Come on. Try it sometime, listeners. You gotta
have fun. Don't be too serious in life.
Toss some garbage at each other, and I mean, realistically or metaphorically, one or the other, they're both good.
Let's have a garbage fight.
Yeah, the kitchen's right next to us. So.
Yeah, we'll just run out there and throw some garbage. Luna, one of our cats, is walking by the studio right now. Pick her up.
She wants to see it.
We can toss her.
She's walking away now, so she's walking towards the garbage, actually. She
is a trash cat.
Yeah, she might as well roll in it. Anyways, this week's episode...
Tangent over.
This week's episode, we're talking all about something that is far from being garbage. I'm going to say it right now. It is very far from being garbage. We're talking all about the film from the 1970s, a film that has sparked inspiration in many, many filmmakers, or even if you're not a filmmaker, you just watch movies for fun. I'm sure it's inspired you in some way if you've seen the film, and if you haven't, well, I'll tell you if you should watch it or not when we get to that point. But my point is it's a crazy movie that's gonna make you feel some way, whether you want to or not. And this week we're talking about a movie called The Godfather. And a lot of people talk about this movie. If you go to film school, they're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's cited as one of the most influential films of all time, right?
I believe through my research, the American Film Institute cited it as the second most influential film of all time.
What's number one?
I believe it's Citizen Kane.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
That makes sense, I guess. This is definitely, though, the Godfather of crime films, right? Of crime movies. This is what set the pace for all other crime films that have come afterwards.
Well, I mean, look back on the beginnings of crime movies and things like that. The whole genre of crime films, so to speak, is, well, we'll say film noir is the whole crime genre in itself. And this whole movie is about the mafia. I mean, that is the crime genre in itself for the most part. I mean,
it took a turn, like you're saying, to focus on family, right? Versus one person, that's doing a crime in film noir. Usually it's a man murdering a woman, unfortunately. But this is the first one that really focuses on a syndicate, right? An entire group of people.
Right. Right. I mean, a lot of crime movies, it's one person commits a crime and there's some cops involved that are trying to figure out who committed that crime and how can we catch them. Or it's a matter of one person is committing a crime and another person is, maybe they're not a cop, but they're also
a private detective.
Yeah, a private detective or something how do I cover my tracks or something like that. This movie, on the other hand, is a family, a criminal family. And they're also involved with a handful of other criminal families.
In total, it's the 5 families, right? So, but I feel there's more than 5. Because in that one scene where they all met, there was 8 of them or something around that table.
Yeah.
So maybe the 5 families, just because it sounds good, that's what they say. We're the 5 families.
Absolutely. So we're going to get quite a bit more into the details of this movie as we continue on this episode. But first, before we really get into the nitty-gritty details of this movie, as I start to talk like Mario Puzo.
I was going to say, who are you? Don? You're the Don Corleon.
Yeah, exactly. Vito Corleon.
Vito.
Before we get into all that, we're going to talk about our side slurps of the week. That's right, our side slurps. Listeners, if this is your first time listening, our side slurps are the things that we have done other than watch the main movie of the week. Maybe we were watching some other TV shows. Maybe we were watching some other movies. Maybe we were watching the clock go by. I don't know. Watching the traffic pursue our
Watching all the snow, because there's been lots of snow.
Guys, Chicago's been really crazy.
It's been rough.
If you're in the East Coast, then let me know, because I hear it's pretty crazy out there too. Anyways, Laura, what have you been up to this past week?
Yeah, a few things that I have actually to talk about for the last week. Usually I feel like I'm pretty chill, but let's get going.
What is that?
I don't know. I gave you a really weird look. I don't know. I'm hyped up on coffee and Costco hot dogs right now.
That's a side slurp in itself.
I was going to talk about the Costco hot dogs, so I guess we'll just start here. Listeners, Adam and I got a Costco membership. If you don't have Costco where you're from, I don't know what to tell you. It's a great place. It's just like a giant warehouse where you can buy tons of cool stuff in bulk, right? Like, that's how you explain it. It's just, but they have everything, like food and gadgets and clothes and books, like anything. Anywho, they have a food court up front, so as you're leaving, they tempt you to come in and get the food. And they have the best hot dogs I've ever had in my life. And I worked for concessions for 12 years of my life and had lots of hot dogs during that time. But I will say Costco hot dogs are superior.
Those hot dogs are very good. And for $1.50 for a hot dog and a drink,
you can't beat that. And it's a big hot dog.
It's a huge hot dog, yeah.
That's a weird side slurp, but so number one, Costco hot dogs. Number two, I've been one of my New Year's resolutions for this year was to start to be more crafty and, be a little more artistic and not just be, sit and read books and watch TV all the time. So I actually have been getting pretty crafty lately, which is a lot of fun. I've been drawing some things, to which then I can print on my Cricut and I can put on mugs or t-shirts or, just making a bunch of little things. I also kind of created these little proposal boxes for my bridesmaids for our wedding. So I made a lot of stuff that went into those as well. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, finally getting back into being crafty, right? And actually making things.
Takes me back to high school when I used to be quite the artistic man.
Adam used to make the cutest little miniature things.
Hey, whether it was high school or even college, when I would make little artistic characters and cartoon things, it all started off when I had a little cartoon character named Bomber Dude in I believe that was kindergarten or something. But it all started with that, and then that went into a lot of other cartoon ideas. So I made a lot of things like that, but now I see Laura creating a lot of different things. So moral of that story, just go get yourself a Cricut and start making all kinds of crafts. Not even
Cricut though. I have fun just drawing stuff on my iPad, on Procreate, or doing my embroidery, or we bought those little miniature kits, doing things like that. I'm all over the place, as in my personality today and in my interests in life. I'm just everywhere. The book I'm reading this week is The Likeness by Tana French. Tana French.
Oh my.
I'm losing it. Tana French is a really good murder mystery-esque writer. She has this series that's set in Ireland, and they focus on detectives, the murder squad, so to say. Really good books. And then just lastly, which is something you'll probably talk about too, Adam, we finally have gotten to the point where we're going out once again and trying new places. So last night I was just at a bar with some coworkers that was all based on tarot cards and very Renaissance-y looking on the inside, which doesn't make sense with tarot really, but the vibe it checked out. It was good. And then, last weekend, you and I, Adam, we finally went out and we went to Untitled, which is a really nice speakeasy bar here in Chicago. We got to listen to some jazz music.
Yeah, and it was great. And they started off covering Devon Campbell's song, Can We Talk?
So good.
Which is a great cover. And it's just a great song. Go
The
listen to
band
it.
was great too. That was playing there. That woman's voice, just like the vibe of the bar. It was huge. It's like in a basement down in River North. Gigantic. They have a whole library wall of whiskey.
They have a lot of whiskey at Untitled. They have way too much whiskey at Untitled. Over 700 kinds of whiskey at Untitled.
It's a lot. I'll end there. I've gone a little crazy, so I'll just stop. That's my That's my slurps for the week.
We'll keep Laura off of her intoxicating caffeine from now on.
I didn't even have. Well, I had the pop with the hot dog, so I guess I have had quite a bit.
She's slowly turning into the Tasmanian devil over here.
I'll calm myself down over here while you talk about your slide slurps, Adam.
That's not a guarantee.
No,
Anyways,
I'll still be hyper, but I mean, it'll make for a good episode, people.
Anyways, Laura and I both can't stop ourselves from watching the show Bar Rescue, if we haven't mentioned that enough already. We have been watching episode after episode of Bar Rescue. There's so many to watch. John Taffer, if you're listening to us, we love watching you.
Come on our
save
show.
These bars. Yeah, come on the show and talk to us sometime. We'd love to have you. And if you have a favorite movie, let us know. We'll absolutely talk about it. But to see him work on these bars and figure out how to help them out and rescue their bars, also, not all of them are still running anymore, which is kind of unfortunate for those bar owners. But, you know, there's only so much you can do after you rescue a bar. So I'm not sure, you know, what to say to that for those particular bar owners. But to see the things that John Taffer does to these bars to sort of reinstill some life into them, it's crazy. It is just so crazy to see where they start and where they end up. So I got to say, for a personal suggestion on a show, if you haven't seen it yet and you like those kind of remodeling kind of shows of saving a sort of like franchise, it's not even a franchise.
No, it's just like little mom and pop bars.
Yeah. So if you like seeing something like that get saved after being, you know, run down from...
like if you're a fan of Gordon Ramsay,
that's a good way to
shows,
put it. That's a great way to put it.
You'll like Bar Rescue.
Yeah, check out Bar Rescue. And to go off of that, too, I also own one of John Taffer's books. I was just about to say, there's a book that I'm reading. Unfortunately, not John Taffer's yet, but that is next on my list. There's another book that I'm reading right now. It's called Make Noise, A Creator's Guide to Podcasting and Great Audio Storytelling by Eric Nussman. And I spent a lot of my time while I was in grad school at Northwestern University back in 2016 through 2017, while I was studying sound design and audio arts and things like that for my master's degree. Spent a lot of that time studying the art of podcasting and just the whole beginning of podcasting around that time. That was when it looked like podcasting was really starting to take off and people were starting to pay a lot more attention to podcasting. A lot of shows are really starting to pick up a lot more steam around that time. Ira Glass was starting to become a lot more popular around that time, and podcasting was starting to be listened to a lot more on things like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It was really starting to become a lot more noticeable, and I was becoming a lot more curious. What was the real gain and interest around podcasting at that time? Why were people listening to podcasts? And my entire thesis was really based around podcasting at that time, and I studied people around the city of Chicago. I asked people around Millennium Park, random people, why they were listening to podcasts or if they were listening to podcasts. I got a very half and half response to whether or not they would take the time to listen to podcasts or if they even were listening to podcasts. And I like digging a little bit deeper into that. So if you're listening to our show right now, thank you very much. And please give the suggestion to your friends to check us out and let me know. What is it that's bringing you into us? Is it the movies? Is it me and Laura's wonderful voices? But it's things like that make me drawn into the book I'm reading right now, Make Noise, A Creator's Guide to Podcasting and Great Audio Storytelling by Eric Nussman. I'm going to keep reading that, and once I finish that up, I'll let you know what I think, and we keep going from there. But that's what I have been up to. And now, let's talk about the movie for this week. That's right. This week's film is The Godfather, which I unfortunately am not a godfather for anything but my music and possibly my cats and maybe my video games. I don't know. Make me a godfather for something.
I mean, none of our friends have kids yet. Like, that's when you.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to take on that responsibility. Actually, I take back what I just said.
And we're not It's mostly like a Catholic thing, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, because obviously, like, the family, you know, the Corleones, it's like a very religious thing, and we're not.
That's true.
So
yeah.
we would. I don't think you'll ever be a godfather, Adam.
That's right. Yep. That's right. Okay. I was gonna say I'm also not Italian to my knowledge, but
Who knows?
yeah, Ancestry.com. Where are you? Anyways, this week's film is The Godfather, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, based on The Godfather by Mario Puzo. The novel by Mario Puzo was released in 1969. So it wasn't very far off that they made this film.
Did you see they bought the movie rights for this before the book was even like in editing stages? He had only had like a 90-page like edit or something, and they had already bought the rights for it.
Yeah, I believe so. I think the concept for the book was out, and Paramount was like, we could make this into a movie. And
isn't that crazy though? Like, he was able to get movie rights before he even finished the book. What if the book came out horrible?
Well, we'll get into that as soon as I finish saying some of the exciting things about this, that oddly enough, there's even more excitement once I finish this. Let me just finish my rant real quick.
Go for it.
Okay. Based on The Godfather by Mario Puzo, written by, so the screenplay was written by Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola, so they had a little bit of a collaboration going on there. And the film starred, now this is where it gets really interesting. Okay, the film starred Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, sorry, Italian people, I'm having a hard time here. Richard Castellano, Robert Duvall, Sterling Hayden, John Marley. I almost said John Mulaney. That would be really interesting.
That would be.
We're going back in time.
Was
people.
he alive?
Excuse me. I don't think so.
I don't think he's that old.
John Marley, Richard Conte.
Just go with it.
Diane Keaton, and many more. Now, this is where this whole thing becomes a whole mess of craziness. Okay, so I was watching a documentary entitled The Godfather, the masterpiece that almost wasn't, that followed, well, it had interviews featuring Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, Walter Murch, and many other people, including Steven Spielberg, other people that very much knew what was going on during the time of The Godfather and its filming. And it's interesting to say that Paramount was fighting against pretty much all of the ideas that Francis Ford Coppola had when he was given permission to direct this movie and pretty much make this movie. Mm-hmm. They did not like his idea of making all of the actors in the film who they were. They didn't really enjoy that they were all these Italian people. They wanted to make the movie contemporary. They didn't want it to be a period piece in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. And it just kept going on from there.
They didn't even want it set in New York, right? They wanted to save money and like have it set in Kansas where their like sound studio was or something.
Exactly.
Like, so essentially take what was the book and use nothing that was in the book.
Well, I also saw in that video that apparently in the book, Mario Puzo made the main character of Michael, he made him have blonde hair or something like that. He had blonde hair and did not necessarily look very much Italian-esque. Oh. And so Paramount wanted to initially cast what was Al Pacino. They wanted to cast someone like Robert Redford. Uh-huh. Can you imagine Robert Redford in The Godfather as Al Pacino?
I could see Robert Redford maybe as Hagen, like the adopted Irish son. You know, that would make sense to me, but no, like this movie is so Italian.
Exactly.
How can they have Robert
Everything
Redford?
that Francis Ford Coppola put into this movie and crafted into this movie as like, this is a period piece with a bunch of Italians. The Godfather, this is an Italian mafia. That all makes clear sense. Mm-hmm. That all very much makes sense. You molded this into a creation that makes sense. And Paramount's ideology, from what is being said, when you research what was being said, does not make sense.
Yeah.
What they were trying to do to this movie to try and save money is like, you're taking away all of the things that everyone looks back on and thinks like, wow, you are just amazingly smart.
Yeah.
Which that does not make sense what I just said. Amazingly smart. But that everything Francis Ford Coppola did, that is what is the inspiration for this movie. And what Paramount was trying to do is they were trying to be budget conscious. They were trying to cut
corners. Yeah. I mean, going back even to before Francis Ford Coppola was hired, like they wanted he was not their first choice to direct this movie. Like they wanted Sergio Leone, right? Who did like Clint Eastwood's Dollars movies, you know, Fistful of Dollars and all of that and whatnot. And like the Once Upon a Time movies. They wanted him to do it, right? Like he's an Italian. They wanted an Italian because they had just had like a crime movie come out the year before that was a bust. It did horrible, right? So that's why they were like, they thought that movie did so bad because they didn't have like Italian Americans or Italians working on the film. So that's why they wanted an Italian director and they wanted Sergio Leone, right? But then they kind of went with Francis Ford Coppola because at the time he was not well known, right? This is one of his earlier works. Like I think he had done one thing before, but it wasn't that. It didn't.
It was like one or two movies,
and they weren't like successful, essentially, right? They didn't make a lot of money, so he was still kind of like a nobody, and so he was cheap, right? Like he was cheap, and then he had all these ideas for this movie, as you were saying. Like he was like, no, it needs to be in the 40s, it needs to be in New York, it needs to be Italian, you know, and like they even didn't want Marlon Brando.
No,
which I can get, right? Like he was a problematic man. He had behavior issues, which, you know, and his career was kind of on a downturn. He had done a few things that weren't great. So it was kind of like, why are we bringing in Marlon Brando when he's not bringing in money on any other movies that he's done, right? But they finally let Francis do what he wanted because they essentially told Marlon Brando, like, you're taking a pay cut. You're not going to get a lot of money, and you're responsible for any fees that are incurred, whatever the word is, due to his behavior. So like if he acted bad on set and costed them hours and days, he had to then pay the company, Paramount, for the loss of money that his behavior cost.
Wow.
It's just like there were so many things before this movie even started filming. Like you were saying, like the movie that almost wasn't. It seemed like even before they started filming, there were just so many like stops that kept happening. And somehow Francis Ford Coppola like got through and got his way, which worked out well because it's a gorgeous movie, you know?
Yeah, and I believe there's an interview with George Lucas in the documentary film that I was speaking of, where he had mentioned that there were times where he had went to visit Francis Ford Coppola on set and he had seen, you know, Coppola had, you know, tossed telephones across the room and he would be punching the wall and things like that because there were so many other people on the production team that were trying to just take over the production of the film. And, you know, executives were trying to take over production of the film because none of them were agreeing with anything that he wanted to do with that movie. I believe until they said he had shown his version of the cut of the scene where Al Pacino's character Michael is in the restaurant. Louis' restaurant with the other member of the other family in The Godfather and the head of the police department, which that entire scene is just a blessing for that movie. Chef's
kiss.
Yep. It's just that scene just ties that film together just to signify Al Pacino's character Michael just taking over the
definitely
family.
The turning point for Michael for sure.
And it's a great scene to show the difference between where he is at that point in the movie versus where he was in the beginning of the movie, where Marlon Brando's character Vito Corleone, the Godfather, is saying, you know, where's Michael at this wedding? And he's wondering where he's at. And then when he finally does show up at the wedding, he's just there with the girl he's seeing. They're sitting at a table and she's asking about the family and what's going on, and Michael's response is just like, oh, that's just my family, that's their business.
Yeah, no, the transformation of Michael's character was something I really wanted to focus on. So maybe once we finish up this pre-production thing, that's definitely something we can come back to, because that's the major focus of the film, honestly.
Well, let's talk about it.
Wait. There was another fun fact I have about how this movie almost wasn't made. So, you know how there's this scene with Johnny Fontaine, the musician or the singer, right? And he's complaining to the Don that he's not getting this movie part. So the Don goes and, kills the guy's horse essentially and forces him to hire Johnny Fontaine. So the same thing happened essentially in the movie. So there was this singer at the time, I can't remember his name, and he really wanted to play the role of Johnny Fontaine, and they didn't want to give it to him. And so he went to a legit one of the Dons and was like, you need to make this happen. I want to be in this movie. And I think maybe it is the guy that is finally in the movie. Maybe Francis, I can't remember now. Maybe Francis, bent to their wishes because he didn't want to upset one of the Dons, right? So put this guy in as Johnny Fontaine.
Okay, that is, I want to laugh at that, but at the same time, I'm kind of frightened.
Yeah, and also another thing too is obviously the real mafia, the actual Dons in New York at the time were actively trying not to get this movie made, because obviously it doesn't shine a good light on them, number one. And number two, they want to pretend like they don't exist, right? They don't want people to know that there's the mafia in real life, right? They're trying to stay underground and everything. So they were all not happy with this movie. And one of their stipulations to allow the movie to happen was that there couldn't be any mention of Costa Nostra. What is it called? The actual name for the mafia, Costa Nostra. I'm making up a word. It's something like that. And you can't actually say the mafia. So, in the movie, it never actually says mafia. They're just the families.
Yeah.
So it's the actual mob, the mafia, was in the background while this movie was being made, causing problems.
Good Lord. Or I'm sure they would have sent somebody out to make a hit on Coppola or something. Right.
Well, isn't that the fear? What if something did happen and they were upset about the movie and then put out a hit on him? So there's a new TV series, actually, because this year is the 50th anniversary of The Godfather. So it came out in 1972, 2022 now. So, which is also a good reason why we reviewed this movie, right? It's 50th anniversary. That's a big milestone. So as part of that, also, Paramount Plus is coming out with a new TV series called The Offer, which is about the making of The Godfather. So I think that'll be really interesting to watch once that comes out. It's in April, because I think they will focus on those aspects, right? What was happening in the background and kind of the problems that Francis was dealing with from Paramount, but also from the mob and all of that. So I'm looking forward to that show.
Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting, the comparison between the opening of this film and the ending of this film. That might be something we talk about a little bit more as we go later into our review. But first off, I gotta say, I love the opening of this film just because of the cat in Marlon Brando's lap. That's just hysterical. You don't get to see it until a little bit after the initial conversation from the guy trying to talk to the Godfather. But even still,
do you think that scene in having the cat is why Dr. Evil has a cat in Austin Powers?
I never thought about that.
I feel like it's got to be, though, right? Because, like we said, this movie is super influential, and every crime movie and whatnot that's come after it is, has been influenced or used some aspect of this movie, right? And I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reason why Dr. Evil has a cat, unless one of the James Bond villains also had a cat, which I think
one does.
One does, from Octopussy or something. Maybe it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
The cat was great. I think, too, just that opening scene is just so good. say what you want about Marlon Brando. Yeah, he was maybe a very controversial man, but he was a great actor. Like, he played the Don so well in this movie. And that, like, he's so soft-spoken, right? Like, sometimes a little too much. He's a little mumbly and you can't hear him. But he's so soft-spoken and not a violent man. Outwardly, you know, like personality wise, he seems very like calm and gentle, which gives his character like makes him more fearful, right? Because you know he's like the top dog. Like, if he wants you dead, you're dead. But he seems this like nice, quiet man. There's just something about the way Marlon Brando played him that worked so well for this movie and for making him like the Don.
Yeah, I think that's really the best part, really, that he's so soft-spoken. That's what makes it even more scary.
Yeah, like I was saying.
You would think that if you want someone to be scary, they've got to be aggressive and they got to be this fearful, loud character, when, ironically enough, I think it's the fact that because he's so quiet and because he's so careful with what he's going to say to you, that's when you're thinking to yourself as you watch the movie, you're constantly listening very carefully, like, what is he going to say? What is he going to say?
Yeah.
What is he going to say? Until you're just thinking, like, I don't know what he's going to say. And I think whatever he's going to say, it's probably going to be like I'm screwed and I'm going to die.
Well, and there is, so even in the not the opening, but in the beginning of the movie, there is that one time where he does have like a burst of rage all of a sudden, right? When he's yelling at Johnny Fontaine and like, be a man. And, you know, like, and just the stark difference between how we see him the rest of the movie, like we said, calm and gentle. And then that one scene where he like loses it, you're like, wow, this guy could really be terrifying if he wanted to be. And he is. It's just you don't see that until that scene. And you're like, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Just like I was saying, Marlon Brando did such a great job in this movie. I really wonder, obviously, the way that he talks in this movie is very popular. Like, everyone knows. If you say The Godfather, right, everyone knows to like the famous lines, right? Like, making him an offer he can't refuse, right? That's the big thing. But the way Marlon says it and the way he like carries himself as this character, it seems like he has cotton balls in his mouth, which I think he perhaps did. And the way he like holds his jaw totally changes the way that he speaks and adds to that whole like mumbly quiet effect that we were talking about.
My first thought every time I saw Marlon Brando performing is, I'm trying to think of the film now, but I believe it was the animated film Sing, where you come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding. And
yeah, no, I think it is Sing. They have that scene with like the mice.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's like the Don of the mice.
Yes.
And he does that line
like
where he's like,
huge family of mice.
You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding.
Yes.
And he like, you can tell it's like a total play off of what happens in The Godfather.
It's like a huge family of mice.
I loved that part of Sing. I'm pretty sure it is Sing. I loved that part. And now finally watching The Godfather, I'm like, that's where it came from. I get it. Because yeah, Marlon with like his cotton ball cheeks, right? And the way he holds his mouth. And he's like, you come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding. That and make him an offer he can't refuse. Like, those are the big lines of this movie. They say that line like 4 times, I think I counted, between him and Michael, because Michael says it later. One of the other things, too, while we're talking about kind of these first few scenes of the movie, another thing I really wanted to point out is just like the stark contrast visually between that first scene in, you know, the Don's office when the guy's talking to him, to then like abruptly shifting to the wedding and how it's so bright and colorful and like lively. And I remember like you and I, when we were watching this movie, when they had that scene change, I was like, whoa, like that's intense, you know, just from going like dark and quiet to like bright and crazy. And while I was like looking up stuff for the movie, obviously, I happened to see that that's one of the things that like Francis Ford Coppola and his cinematographer really wanted to do, though. They did want to have like this play between like light and dark between the scenes and across the movie. And I think you can see that really well in those first 2 scenes. And then also later on when Michael is in Italy, right? Because when he's in Italy, it's like sunny and bright and like it looks beautiful and romantic. And then they cut to the scenes with, you know, the other brothers and Vito in New York, and you're back to that like grungy, dark, kind of vibe. And I think that's a really interesting way to visually like move this movie along. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for a comparison between the characters too, and kind of where they stand with the family or what's going on. I mean, Michael, when he's in Italy, it's very open. He's not exactly playing, mobster in Italy quite at that moment. I mean, he's very separate from the family and what he's doing with the family in that moment. He's just kind of on his own in Italy. He's got a new wife. He's in his own realm on his own, versus when he is with the family and when he is doing these crimes, that's when he's back in the syndicate in the dark, in these rooms.
Yeah.
He's murdering people, doing these things. So again, or with the wedding, it's like happy time, open, not criminal activity. Or even if there is, it's like the people it's showing, like Michael, it's like he's not a part of that yet in the opening.
Yeah.
It's like he's, this innocent man in this innocent lifestyle. And then again, when he's back into the criminal activity, like at the restaurant or something, it's like dark restaurant, like about to take someone out.
Maybe really quickly, we should just kind of give an overview of this movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. But in case you haven't, as we're saying these names, maybe we should kind of explain a little like who they are. Essentially, what this movie is it spans a time frame between 1945 to 1955. And really what The Godfather does, essentially, it's like the chronicle of the Corleone family under their main patriarch, which is Vito, Marlon Brando's character, and then focusing on the transformation of I think Michael's his youngest son. So his youngest son, Michael, from this really, as we're saying, like in the beginning, he's a war hero. He's like the good one, right? He has nothing to do with the family business. He's innocent. He's really reluctant to be part of the mafia, essentially. But as the movie goes on and things happen, we slowly see him shift and starting to take on the role, right? Like getting more involved. And then after the Don is almost killed, he then essentially becomes the Don, right? So the transformation of Michael's character in this movie is really, I think, what the movie's about to me. Like, that's the main focus and plot of this film. Seeing him from, good guy to, at the very end, being the Godfather.
Yeah, the new Godfather. I don't think Michael's character really foresaw himself becoming the Godfather. It's just the fact that he saw his family in this web of, all the other mafia families trying to take out his family. I think, and then his family just started getting eliminated. So.
I think the thing that shifted his perception about what he wanted to do is when Vito was shot. So one of the other families, essentially put a hit out on Vito and shot him like 5 times or something. I don't know how the man survived. But I think once that happened, Michael was like...
It was 7 shots.
Is it 7?
Yeah.
Wow. But once that happened, Michael was like, I can't stand by or be on the sidelines anymore. They came for my father. Now I'm coming for them. And his other brother, Sonny, the older brother, I think he was always part of the business, right? And he's more of like crazy. So he was very much like, we need to retaliate.
And you'd think like Sonny clearly would have been the next Godfather.
He was just too like rash though. He wouldn't.
Well, then he died anyways.
Yeah, well, then he's killed. But the reason why Michael makes such a better Godfather is because, like Vito, he thinks about things right before he acts. Yeah, like plans and things. Sonny would just like turn on a dime and he hears something and he's like, out, go beat someone up or shoot him. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a Don that's that volatile, really, is what it comes down to. And there is another son. Is his name like Frito? Frito?
Frito? Frito-Lay?
I think it is, though. Isn't it like Fredo? Fredo? Probably Fredo.
Are you talking about the lawyer attorney guy? Or?
No, the son that they send out to Vegas. Because they're just kind of like, get rid of him. He seems kind of like...
Oh, the one that turns on him.
Yeah, essentially. And Michael's like, don't you ever speak against the family.
Don't you ever.
But I feel like that son, they were just like... We don't care about sending to Vegas. Really, the main sons are Sonny and Michael, and then Hagen, right? They're adopted.
For a second, it just sounds like you're naming them all after foods, like at the grocery store.
Sonny D.
Sonny D, Frito, Rutabaga.
Great names. I think it is Frito though.
It'd be a
Fredo.
great Godfather spinoff. Can I just say that? Like, we just have like the grocery store family.
So essentially, what you want is like Sausage Party with the plot of the Godfather.
I did not say that.
Well, what else? Like, that's the animated film with food.
All right. Okay. Anyways. Sunny D and Rutabaga.
Sunny Day. Yeah, I don't know. Are there other scenes in this movie, Adam, that like really stand out to you that you wanted to? I mean, we kind of talked about the restaurant scene a little bit already, but for me, like you said, that was such like an important part of this movie.
Well, there was a part of that we didn't talk about, and I thought it was funny when you and I were watching it, and your initial reaction to that I thought was kind of funny, but you brought up a good point, and it's because when they spoke Italian in this movie, there was typically subtitles, and in that particular scene, there was not subtitles, and I thought that was interesting at first, too. It's like, hey, why aren't there subtitles in this scene? But unless you're speaking fluent Italian, which Laura and I, unfortunately, do not speak fluent Italian.
I can say like one sentence.
Yeah, let me download Duolingo real quick and work on my Italian.
I can say, Io sono un ragazzo Giovanni.
What
I think it means I'm a little girl.
Well, you're going to have a hard time in Godfather then. But so I'm a little lost when it comes to the Italian, but back to that scene, there's no subtitles to translate the Italian.
The restaurant scene,
yeah, at that restaurant scene, and Al Pacino's character and the other character that was speaking with Al Pacino's character, they're speaking fluent Italian with one another, no subtitles in English to translate that, and I'm watching this movie thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I believe that's exactly the intention that Francis Ford Coppola was going for, because there's also the other character that's sitting in the restaurant with them, who's the head of the police, and he doesn't know what they're talking about. He's just like me, the viewer, who just speaks English, and we're watching this movie. He's sitting there in the restaurant, and we're experiencing what he's experiencing. We're just kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's the intent, I believe, that Francis Ford Coppola was going for.
No, I agree. I think like exactly what you were saying. I think he purposely didn't put subtitles in that scene. Because like you're saying, the scenes in Italy, or when it's, Italian spoken in other parts of the movie, we do see subtitles pop up. But for that one, and I think he was trying to put us in the place of like the chief police, like, are they talking about him? Are they like going to turn against him and he wouldn't know? Like, it gives a bit of suspense, which also plays into that whole scene. That whole scene was like, I was like in suspense the entire time, right? Because so the point of that scene is Michael goes to this restaurant with Salazzo and the police chief, and Salazzo's the man that put the hit out on his dad, right? And he's working with the police chief, who also kind of wants Vito dead. So Michael goes to meet them thinking it's going to be like a truce, right? But actually, Michael and the rest of the Corleone family have planned to kill them. But the whole time he's sitting there and eating with them, you're like, well, is he actually going to kill them? Are they going to turn against him? Like, did the gun actually get hidden in the bathroom? There's so much suspense happening in that scene. And then with the two of them speaking and we don't know what they're saying, it's like, is Michael maybe turning against his family and he's, trying to like make good with this guy, like what's happening? And then finally we see Michael go in the bathroom and get the gun and you're like, oh no, like he's going to do it. He's going to kill him.
Well, he was struggling to get that gun too. He was reaching around like, is there even a gun here?
Like, did they actually get the gun there? Like, what is he going to do if the gun's not there?
Exactly.
So that scene, it's just done so well.
And I just want to say that from a audio perspective, from a sound design perspective, this is something to really learn from if you're thinking about using sound design to really showcase the emotions of a character. Because when it comes to the final, spoiler alert, the characters that aren't Al Pacino both die. That was the point of the scene. But to really showcase the emotions of Al Pacino's character, Michael, they're using the sound of a train just screeching, like putting on the brakes, like basically what it sounds like is like emergency brake, like screeching around a bend or something. Whoever was sound designing the scene, could have been Walter Murch, honestly, doing some of that. But it's just like, it's things like that. If you imagine that scene with no sound design, you're not going to get the same effect of understanding how Michael's character really felt as he was sitting in that chair thinking about, am I going to fire this gun or not? Because he sits back down with a gun in his pocket, and the other characters talking to him, trying to explain to him how he feels, what he's thinking about, the families working together, and him working with them, how they can come to, you know, a sort of collaboration with one another. And he's trying to internalize all this in his head. He's probably thinking about what this guy is saying to him, and at the same time thinking about, how am I going to off this guy with this gun and this cop, and, you know.
Well, and it's like the first time he probably killed people in war, but I think that's a little different than killing someone like
this is the first time he's killing for the family, really. Yeah. And he's starting to become part of the family.
Like, are you ready to cross that line?
Yeah.
And we already knew, right? If he did kill them, he'd have to leave New York. He couldn't stay, right? He had to disappear, which is why he ends up in Italy. So he's probably wondering too, like, should I do this? Should I leave my family when things are so hectic and so unpredictable right now, you know?
Yeah. And to showcase his feelings, those emotions, instead of using music as a score to really emphasize his emotions, you know, instead of doing like a dun 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 dun, or, you know, they could have put
like Jaws.
Yeah. Well, you know, similar times. Or you could put like the sound of like multiple voices happening, like, you know, overlay that on top or something. Mm-hmm. Instead of doing all that, they put the sound of a train, like a screeching train, just getting louder and louder and louder until finally he stands up and just fires that gun off on both of them. And I thought that was just perfect for that. Yeah. Perfect for the space. It's like you could hear trains and ambience like in that kind of space in New York City. So I mean, think of the restaurants here when we're sitting under the L, like you can hear the trains. Yeah, you would never. I don't think you'd ever hear them quite screeching like that. But we have other sounds going on, right? We would hear the people in the restaurant talking. We would hear, you know, had like restaurant noises. And for the sake of the scene, they just amplified that train. Like that's like, you know. Honestly, that scene I think is like the best scene in that whole movie. So memorable, like down. So good. I think another scene that really, I wouldn't say it was like a great scene, but just it like gave me like a whoa emotion was, I mean, in the very beginning, right, when Hagen goes to talk to the film producer about Johnny Fontaine starring in the film, when he's laying in bed, and then he like starts to get up and you see all the blood. Oh yeah, and you don't know what it is. I thought he lost a limb or something. No, that's what I thought. I was like, did they cut off his hand like in his sleep, or did they stab him? And then like slowly he throws the sheet back, and you just see like a horse head in his bed. And I was like, whoa. And you know, it was a real horse. Oh, it was a real horse head? Yeah, which pissed people off a lot. You know, like animal rights people, obviously. Yeah. But Francis Ford Coppola said it was a horse that was being killed anyway. Like, it would have been killed anyway. But still, to use an actual, like a real horse head is quite intense. But that scene I was like, whoa. There were a few parts where I was just like, wow, this is intense, or like overkill. Like when in the beginning, when the one guy gets garroted in the car and he's like flailing, you know, or no, that's in the end when Carlo, the son-in-law, they kill him in the car and he kicks out the windshield. I was like, wow, that is intense. And then even when Sonny dies, like the amount of bullets that they shot at that man, like I was like, this is a bit like too much. But I mean, he did it for a reason, to give you that reaction, to be like, whoa, what is happening? But those are I'm sure it's things that they would have done in real life, too. Well, yeah, look at Bonnie and Clyde. When they were killed, like they shot tons of bullets into them in their car. And that's what I thought of when they killed Sonny. It was very Bonnie and Clyde-esque, which maybe that was, you know, one of the influences for it or whatever. But yeah, those few scenes that were just so intense are just so memorable. And one of the other scenes that I really liked actually too was in the end when Vito dies, when he's playing with his grandson, and it seems so happy, right? Like that's one of those scenes where it's bright and sunny and he's playing in the garden with his little grandson, and he like improvises that scene where he puts the orange peel in his mouth and like scares a little kid. Yeah. And it just seems so happy, and you're like, oh, so joyful. I think it's a great look at showing him and a younger child. They're, you know, they're playing together but could that be symbolic of sort of him and Michael necessarily? You know?
Yeah. Well, I remember, I think I even told you while we were watching the scene, I was like, he's gonna die. Like, you could tell they were, that juxtaposition between him, he was super old, you could tell his health was failing him, but then there's this really young and like joyful little child, and the like how bright and sunny it was and how like angelic it was. Like, oh, like he's dying soon, they're gonna kill him. And then lo and behold, he has a heart attack
right there
during the scene and dies. I don't know. Like, that's just another scene, too, that sticks out in my mind as one that was just done so well.
And, we could keep going on with the amount of scenes that are in this film, because I'm amazed that neither myself or Laura has mentioned how long this movie is, but it's about 3 hours long. So this is before the Lord of the Rings days. But, this movie runs at about 3 hours long. Thank you, Francis Ford Coppola, for giving us the length of this movie to enjoy.
Can you imagine what the uncut version of this movie would look like? Because I saw that they had filmed a lot more scenes focused on Sonny, but they cut them just because they were like, we need to put the focus on Michael. But can you imagine how much, like, what the uncut full version of this would be? It'd be like 6 hours.
I don't know. But, I mean, forget that the movie's 3 hours long. Forget that the uncut version would be even longer. Just check it out.
It's worth it.
We'll keep elaborating onto that as we keep going. But as I continue going here, let's talk about the reviews for this thing.
Yeah.
As we talk about one of our favorite review sites, Rotten Tomatoes. Guys, is there any surprise to this? 97% from critics, 98% from the audience.
This is like one of the times where I feel like most movies, it's like the audience loves it, critics hate it, or opposite. Critics love it, audience hates it. And this is like one of those chances. They're both almost 100, right? That's
exactly.
Crazy.
And I didn't mention it earlier when I was giving my whole, stat check on the directed by, based on, et cetera, but the budget for this movie, from what I saw, $6 to $7.2 million was the budget on this thing. Mm-hmm. It box officed at 246 to 287 million in the 70s.
It's the highest grossing film of that year, 1972.
It's unbelievable. Guys, we have movies coming out now that have budgets around these numbers or more, or much more, and cannot even come close to getting a higher box office ratio than, what their budget was, which is very unfortunate. And I will say January 2022, it's really because I would say the coronavirus, COVID-19, or just a lot of it now is digital streaming.
Yeah.
A lot of people just don't want to go to movie theaters right now.
Please still go to your movie theater, though. It's an experience.
I know. Like, let's all go to the movie theaters. Why would you not go to a movie theater?
We might go tomorrow.
I might go right now. So yeah, it's just something to think about. The movie theater experience is absolutely incredible, and I'm still flabbergasted that the box office numbers on this are just incredible.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, this was one of the starting points for Francis Ford Coppola's career.
Well, this is really the launching point, not even for Coppola's career, but also for Al Pacino's.
Yeah.
Like, this is one of his first big things. This really launched him to be who he is. So, yeah, I mean, this movie just, for the actors, the movie itself, and the influence it's had on, like, everything that's come after it. I mean, and on that point, like you're saying, it the highest grossing film of 1972. Roger Ebert named it his best film of the year also. Like, this movie just, I mean, like Citizen Kane, right? It's up there just as probably, like you said, those are 1 and 2, like the most influential films of all time.
Which that brings us to our final point, which is the slurps up or slurps down section. That's right. If you haven't heard it from us already, we're going to tell you now whether we recommend this movie or if we think you should avoid it. I think you can predict where we're going, people. Slurps up or slurps down. Laura, what would you say?
Yeah, absolutely slurps up. I will say, in the beginning, the movie, it's 3 hours long. It's not a crazy plot, right? It does drag at times. So that's like my one critique, right? I will say there were times where I was like, what is the point of this movie? But then once you get going and you get into it more, you realize, like, this is about Michael. This is about the family, and then it gets so interesting when you just look at Michael, even it's himself and the transformation he makes throughout this movie. So, if you start watching it in the beginning, you're feeling like it's not your thing, just stick to it. I promise it makes up for it once you complete the thing. Just definitely slurps up for me all around. Visually stunning. The acting is amazing. Everything that we've said throughout this whole episode, really. What about you, Adam?
I absolutely 100% give this movie a slurps up. Look at this from a film historian perspective and just appreciate this movie.
Yeah.
Watch it for the fun of it, and even more so, watch it just so you can just feel what it's like to watch one of Francis Ford Coppola's earliest films. And then I'd say go on and watch more Francis Ford Coppola's movies so you can see that transformation of where he went to after he made The Godfather. Maybe watch some of the sequels to The Godfather. Watch the Conversation.
Oh yeah.
It's incredible to see the work that Francis Ford Coppola does in his work in the projects that he makes, and I am just so amazed with the things that were put into this movie. And I am astounded to think that a lot of the things that Francis Ford Coppola did with this movie were almost turned down by Paramount Studios. And I just can't believe that. I do not want to believe that Paramount Studios did not like his ideas. And then I am just so happy to see that Francis Ford Coppola could still create this movie and went to the studios and showed them, like, I want these actors, I want this plot line, I want it this way, and released the movie the way it is. And then look what we have now. We have this wonderful film that so many people look back on and think, wow, this is such an incredible movie. I want something that could be like that, or has something similar in that style.
Well, just to butt in, this just came to my mind as you were talking, and kind of how we've said, this movie influenced all crime movies after it. I'm sitting here after watching The Godfather and you're talking about this. I'm like, you know what? Now look at all of Scorsese's films, like The Irishman, Goodfellas, The Departed, I'm thinking about all of those now, and I'm like, he had to have been influenced by The Godfather, especially with The Irishman. Don't you feel like it's so similar in the vibe and how it's just a long drawn out, about a person's life? And
yeah, I mean, Scorsese was still making movies around the same time as Francis Ford Coppola.
Taxi Driver was
right
the
around
late 70s, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, around there. But Irishman is very recent. Goodfellas was in the 90s, around there or something. Departed was a little around there too, right? So, and Scorsese is his own man, right? He's also very influential in his own right. But I feel like I can't now, sitting here, not see influences of The Godfather in specifically The Irishman or Goodfellas.
Yeah, it's definitely food for thought. And again, like I was saying, watch this movie with the mindset of just a film aficionado would have, just dig deep into this and just think wow, what else is pulling inspiration from The Godfather? And just keep going. There's just so many things today that have brought inspiration and influence from The Godfather that you wouldn't think about until you watch this movie. And once you do, you're like, dang, this movie's got so much going on.
Yeah.
And again, it is a 3-hour long movie. Grab some snacks and sit down and watch it. But it is so worth the time. I highly recommend this movie. It does not disappoint.
I'm really excited to watch part 2 now, because not only do we get Al Pacino again as Michael, but we also get Robert De Niro as a young Vito. And so I can't wait. I feel like you and I definitely, it's longer. I think part 2 is 3.5 hours, but we should definitely put that on our list to watch soon.
And as Laura and I both said, you will be able to see this movie in theaters pretty soon, because this is the year of its 50th anniversary. They're bringing it back to the big screen.
Ooh.
I highly recommend going and seeing it there.
If they're doing a 35 mil, Adam.
What can we say? Except that we recommend going and seeing it there. Go do it. I won't say it any more times than that. Actually, yes, I will. Go see it.
Go see it.
And that wraps it up for this episode of Screen Slurps. Be sure to follow us on social media at Screen Slurps on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And be sure to listen to us on Spotify, Ghana, or just about any other podcast streaming service out there. And if you enjoy what you hear, slide on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. It will help us a lot. And if there's any crazy movies you want to hear about, let us know. Leave a comment on one of our social media pages, and trust me when I say we will be sure to talk about it. So closing out, I'm Adam Meisner.
And I'm Laura Herlocker.
Slurps up, and we will catch you later.